Amidst global economic headwinds, remittance to Nigeria and other countries in sub-Saharan Africa has reached $53 billion in 2022. That's according to a report from the World Bank. This represents an increase of 5.2%. That's $53 billion in 2022 compared to 16.4% in 2021. The report notes that remittances as much as important source of household income for most low and middle income countries has been a help to be able to survive harsh economic conditions such as COVID-19 pandemic, alleviate poverty, and improve nutritional outcomes. The World Bank noted that although the rising price of goods has adversely affected migrants' incomes, this remains very worrisome at this time for the World Bank. The International Air Transport Association has disclosed that foreign airlines funds trapped in Nigeria has risen to $550 million. The chairman Aviation Committee of the House of Representatives, Mr. Nolim Naji, and Vice President for Africa and Middle East IATA, Mr. Kamil Alawadi, said the total trapped funds of airlines in Africa stands at $1.1 billion US. However, Mr. Wadi disclosed that a total of airline of $1.1 billion of airline funds are being blocked, and half of these funds are held in Nigeria. He also noted that interventions by the Ministry of Aviation, Minister of Aviation, Mr. Adi Sirika, and of course the CBN Governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, and representatives of IATA to discuss the way forward led to the gradual liquidation of the backlog of the trapped funds. Mr. Naji appealed to IATA to prevail on its member airlines to show understanding as the various organs of government were making efforts to ensure that their ticket proceeds are duly remitted. Nigeria's crude oil production has hit 1.6 million barrels per day in 1 month. Chief Upstream Investment Officer of the NNPC Upstream Investment Management Services, Mr. Bati Wunti, disclosed this at the 11th Practical Nigerian Content Forum in Uyo, Akwa Ibom State capital. Mr. Wunti maintains that the output increase was as a result of government's rectangular approach to the fight against crude oil theft. He explains further that all hands are on deck to fight against oil theft. The Navy, the police, industry players, and all, host community and all are involved. Interesting. Now, let's get talking. The importance of Nigeria's economic diversification towards shared prosperity across the country has continued to gain momentum at different forums. This development has been attributed to serve as a roadmap that will transmit Nigeria's economy from a monoproduct economy to a more robust and diversified one that offers opportunity for real growth. And of course, similarly, shift from the reliance on crude oil as a source of revenue generation will make the government take a critical look at enormous agricultural resources that could make Nigeria one of the top 10 contributors to global gross domestic product. Now, ahead of the Society of Women in Taxation Pop Personality Lecture that will hold this Friday, I'm going to be speaking live via Zoom to look at the roadmap, yes, of course, and to chart it out for economic advancement for the Nigerian state. I have two guests joining me via Zoom. But first is Dr. Ifueko Omoigui Okauru. She's the former chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service. And of course, my second guest is the national chairman of SWIT. SWIT is the Society of Women in Taxation. She's also Dr. Ruth Abiola Adimula. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us on Business Nigeria this afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, Dr. Ifueko, I'm going to start with you. It's really a pleasure to have you on Business Nigeria. I went back to check and to see all of the giant strides you made during 2004 and 2012 at the FRS. Can you take us through? I know a lot was done, but can we just do an overview of some major achievements? I see the way you improve the staff welfare, making them to understand that it's more than just taxation. They could learn other things. I can go on and on. Just take us through some of this.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to your program. I'll say that it will take more than this program to even highlight a few things, but let me just name a few. One, I think, is even bringing to the fore the importance of taxation. Again, like I tell people, the reforms didn't start with me. The reform started with my predecessor, who was the chair, Balama Manu, of the FRS. Again, all driven by the president at the time, President Olusegun Obasanjo, and the Minister of Finance at the time. I believe that was Adamu Chioma. And I remember when I was interviewed for the job, and I asked Olusegun Obasanjo really what was his objective of the reforms and what he wanted to achieve. He mentioned that at some point the country will not be dependent, will need to be less dependent on oil, and that there was a need to start building the country to focus on growing non-oil taxation and ensuring that the revenues needed to drive the development of our country and the funding required to drive the development of our country was in place. And the level of dependence on oil was not healthy. And I remember also during his tenure, before I came in, and that was when oil prices crashed. And I think that realization that, look, oil prices could crash anytime. What do we do? So that was, I think, first of all, to put at the center point taxation. So I believe that's what one of the achievements I would say was done, so that you don't put revenue at the backbench. We put in place a law, the very first time of putting in place the Federal Inland Revenue Service Establishment Act, which was designed to make the Federal Inland Revenue Service autonomous, fund itself, and not have an excuse not to drive revenue, and also make the Federal Inland Revenue Service a coordinating body in a sense of all revenue generation throughout the country. Federal Inland Revenue Service was therefore chairing the Joint Tax Board. They've always done that, but to really emphasize the need for it to just put in the law, recognize the need for it as a coordinating regulator to ensure that the provisions of the personal income tax, which is really unusual, that is spread amongst right now 37 tax authorities, but it's one law we're all executing. And so the Federal Inland Revenue Service, as chair of the Joint Tax Board, but has responsibility as FRS, to ensure that it coordinates that across the country. And then also for all non-related, personal income taxes, corporate taxes, stamp duties, capital gains tax, value-added tax, and any other revenue generating sources of funds to drive that, including petroleum profits tax. So in putting in place the law, it wasn't to neglect oil as a source of revenue, but it was basically to ensure that all revenues, both oil and non-oil revenues, had one agency that took the pride of place in ensuring that was done. Now, of course, to do that, you needed to therefore ensure you had the right people, the right systems. Some I started, some were not able to be finished, some were finished, some needed to be, continued on an ongoing basis. So I would say that's one. The second thing was that from the taxpayer's point of view, while raising that awareness, was also to make things convenient for the taxpayer. And so at the time I came in, if you wanted to pay withholding tax, you go to an office. You wanted to pay stamp duty, you go to an office. You wanted to pay capital gains tax, you go to another office. So it was all, it wasn't convenient. You in one city, you could go to 4 or 5 different offices to pay tax. So the concept of the one-stop center, and the reorganization of the tax office to really focus on what revenue administration was all about, which includes returns processing, payment processing, audit as a necessary part of the revenue administration process, and of course, investigation if there are issues that needed to have further investigation, enforcement, and all traditional revenue administration processes. The whole idea, therefore, was to professionalize the tax office, center it, make it more convenient for the taxpayer, and also not just focus on the physical infrastructure. At that time, we had the likes of InterSwitch who were looking for an opportunity to showcase, the fact that you could pay at one point, and so that kind of rhymed significantly with what we wanted to do, and so that's when the whole idea of pay direct in the banking system, where you pay and you pay for everything you need to pay at one point, and it's all recognized, for the taxpayer. So those are the two things. I know you've talked about staff welfare. I didn't want to just overemphasize that, but I think what I'll just say regarding staff is the fact that we wanted our staff to be proud members of a very noble profession. Be professional in the way they do things. A lot of capacity building took place. Even the way we structured the organization had capacity at the back of our mind to build capacity. There was a whole fight against the use of tax consultants who were not adding any value to the system. And the whole idea was that, yes, there may be some immediate pain because you're not going to get as much revenue in the immediate term, but ultimately, you build a sustainable organization. So those are I would say, some of the major highlights of what we've done.
Really, really interesting. Now, this is the maiden edition of the Distinguished Personality Lecture, and this is in honor for you. This is going to be particularly for you, in your honor. Let's talk about the topic now, the roadmap for economic advancement. Do you think that states are doing enough to generate more revenue from the non-oil end?
I don't know why you're focusing on states. We're discussing economic advancement, which cuts across at the federal, the state, and the local government. And the answer is across board. Across board. There's a lot that still needs to be done. And I think fundamentally, across board, the gains we had in the past, I think we need to get back to that, where we still have not recognized, not just in terms of the law, because I must say the current administration, in enacting the finance bill every year, has really taken one of the things that was planned, during those tax reforms and executed it brilliantly. By having a finance bill together with the budget, and by that way the tax laws are revised. I must give kudos to the Minister of Finance and all the related teams and all those that have worked on that, and the legislature and the president for making that happen. But yet, in spite of that, you step back and you still get the sense that revenue generation is competition amongst agencies. It's competition between federal, state, and local governments. It's not about collaboration. It's still not yet, and I see we are talking more about it now. It's not yet about having one database, harmonized, and also recognizing one authority. When you fragment the points of collecting certain types of revenues, you lose the essence and the value of bringing it all together. So that mindset that we're all in it together, that mindset that is about building a common system that everyone ties into, that mindset that revenue must be accounted for, that mindset that leakages should be, you can't completely eliminate it, but should be significantly eliminated, that there's no tolerance for leakages. That mindset that we should stop using consultants just because we need cash today does not build a system. I mean, that mindset, I think, is where we really need to start with. And I think that we need a lot of work in that regard.
Let me hold on now. Let me talk to Dr. Adimula. She has joined us now, and that's Dr. Ruth Abiola, who's the National Chairperson of SWIT. If you can hear me, Dr. Adimula, let's talk a bit about SWIT and women's involvement in taxation. What are your aims and objectives in general?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. For the Society of Women in Taxation, our aims and objective is to promote the ideals of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, particularly in respect to the taxation, tax policies, and guidelines in the country, and most importantly, to also work directly with the informal sector, the women in business, and we do this through media publications, publicity, school programs, and related activities to ensure that we engage the general public especially the informal sector, to know the right taxes to pay, and also we serve as an abinja between the general public and the tax authorities.
So can I follow up with you and ask that why Dr. Okauru for this maiden edition of this lecture?
Yes, Dr. Okauru, the former executive chairman of Federal Inland Revenue Service, is a distinguished member of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria. She is also one of our patrons, and she has contributed tremendously to tax profession in Nigeria and even beyond. In addition to that, she is a woman of intelligence that we believe that the wealth of knowledge that she has in this area is good enough to be shown to the entire populace, at least for the promotion and the progress of the socioeconomic aspects in the country. And we are glad to do this. This is the first time that SWIT is doing it. And when we considered a lot of things, we discovered that she has all the necessary complementary aspects, both intellectually, physically, experience, and everything that it takes to be able to engage the government and the general public on how to advance this country in the socio-economic sector.
Interesting. Now, let me take the question out to Dr. Okauru now. Let me ask you about the forthcoming personality lecture again, but particularly this time around the role of women in economic development. Bring us up to speed. What kind of roadmap are you thinking about, or would you wish to be implemented? Do you think women in tax administration are doing as much as they should? Can they do better?
I'll be giving you some insight into what I'm going to say. So I look forward to you listening to the presentation on Friday. I now know that you want to know about women, and so I'll bear that in mind.
Okay, I just wanted to know if they are doing enough in the tax environment.
Okay, so let's not link it to the lecture.
Okay.
Let me talk about women just generally.
All right.
Women are a tremendous strength and a tremendous force. And I'm so proud of Dr. Adimula, who leads the Society of Women in Taxation, not just because she's a woman, but because she's a role model for other women and other persons in taxation. I met her for the very first time recently. And what do I see in her as an example? I see in her what I see in a lot of women. I see her ability to focus on achieving results. I see her ability to, once she decides she wants to achieve something, she sees it to the very end. I see her ability to pay attention to detail. I see her ability to be able to mobilize teams, drive teams to success. And honestly, those are also the strengths of the women I've related with and the women I know in this country that sit in every profession, not just tax, medicine, nursing, everywhere, engineering, construction, art, movies, name it. So when you talk about have they done enough, it's a country where we should be? No. Have I done enough? No, I haven't. So can we do more? A lot more. Do we have the capacity to do more? Yes. Now, what then are the issues with women? And let me say that, unfortunately, it's something that, and part of what I'm going to talk about in my lecture are my personal thoughts and reflections. Over 60 years in living as a Nigerian. And I've realized over time, for some people, they realize it at birth. For some people, they realize it midway in their career. I realized it pretty late because my upbringing did not even recognize that, oh, they have a daughter. I'm the only daughter of my parents. And we were all brought up equally. Not many people have that experience. And what I find is that we're suboptimizing women. Not because the women don't have the capacity, not because the women don't have the zeal, but sometimes just because we're a woman. Our society does not really elevate the woman where she should be. So to answer your question, have they done enough? Just like everybody else, just like the men, just like everybody across the states, just like the government, just like in the private sector, have we done enough? No, because if the country is where it is, then there's a lot more that we can do. Can the women do more? Yes. And it's quite disappointing that little changes in legislature that will give women better positioning in our country, to aspire for the highest of authorities and to be given, they say we should grab it. And the laws, and when I was talking about tax reform, I talked about, putting a law in place. So laws are fundamental to creating a culture, to creating the institution, to building an environment, and to building our country. The laws of our country right now do not give our women enough seat at the table. And that's an area that we need to do a lot more because the women are ready. And I must even add, at the risk of, again, this is subject to debate, we're actually top of our class wherever we are.
Interesting stuff. Now, almost wrapping up now, I would like to ask you again, I'm a journalist, and the figures we see is that our GDP or our tax to GDP ratio remains around 6%, maybe hovering around that, while some African countries are doing far better than that. Now, I want to ask that with the adoption of technology, can we do more than we are doing? And how can we improve this without necessarily increasing taxes across board?
Let me just note that without a doubt, technology helps. And technology enables countries, individuals, organizations to move at record speeds that they never thought was possible, to do things they never thought was possible. And so, yes, with the adoption of technology, and let me say whole-scale adoption that is not limited to just the urban areas, that is not limited to just a select few, wholesale adoption across the country in every nook and corner, where you have connectivity from one corner to the other, where the phones, the smartphones that give you access and give you ability to access connectivity and reach out to a knowledge base that many people are contributing to, is affordable and are able to be accessed by anyone with no one left behind. So the able, the disabled, the men, the women, the children, the adults, they all see that power. And government itself is driven by the phone. You want to pay your bill, put it here. You want to do anything, you do it here, without having to necessarily see anyone. So there's no doubt that with that whole-scale adoption, it's important. But let me also add one thing. Now, let me add that technology doesn't work alone. Technology doesn't work alone. Technology works with laws. Technology works fundamentally with the people who drive the technology. And for people to drive technology where there's full-scale adoption, we must all be on the same one page. We must be willing to collaborate, not fight each other, not point fingers, not complain that one thing is bad and the other. Not that things will not be bad. We should all be focused on that one goal and see obstacles as opportunities to surmount obstacles. For me, that's probably the hardest challenge. The technology is there, but collaborating with each other across ethnic groups, across political parties, let's believe in one Nigeria. So beyond technology, and technology can help, but those in the leadership at the various levels, whether it's government or private sector, the military, wherever, must have one goal. That coalition of a common voice, that is how we want to build our country, will surmount any obstacle with the right hand.
Very, very interesting one there. Dr. Adimula, a parting shot from you. What more should we expect at the lecture series on Friday?
Yes, thank you very much. The lecture is going to be very educative and is going to set some roadmaps for advancement in the socio-economic development in this nation. Knowledgeable people, 6 executive governors representing their regions are coming as panelists to discuss the lecture that our honoree will give on Friday. And in addition to that is the fact that you may want to listen to candidates who don't have plans for the socio-economic advancement of this country. There will be room for them to tell Nigerians what they have in plan for us. And so we use this opportunity to invite all professional bodies, women associations, the 3 arms of the government, because this is an epoch-making event that will go down in the annals of the history of this country.
All right.
That the Society of Women in Taxation, the women wing of CITN has organized this program. Thank you very much.
All right, ma. Thank you so much, Dr. Adimula. There, you've made your point. Dr. Ifueko, any parting shots there? You have anything to say as we wrap up this segment?
Well, the parting shot I'd like to say, first of all, I really like your questions, and I hope we'll see you also on Friday.
Okay.
And I look forward to feedback at the end of the lecture, because feedback is the oil of creativity and the oil of improvement. The parting shot I'd like to say is coming up with a roadmap is a lot easier than executing the roadmap. But it helps that we even understand the roadmap. It helps that we all agree with the roadmap. Whatever you see in the FRS, what was achieved in that period of 2004 to 2012, which even in 2022 resonates, of which I'm so much proud of to be a part of, was because we started with a roadmap. We started with a roadmap that we all agreed to. We started with a roadmap that we believed in. And we also had a roadmap that now drove our meetings every single step of the way, monitoring, tracking, and ensuring that that roadmap was executed and that the goals that we wanted to achieve were achieved. The roadmap on Friday is a start. But we all need to believe in a roadmap. We all need to come together to move our country forward. We're not happy with where our country is. We need to all believe on that roadmap, believe that there is hope. But more importantly, be part of the delivery of executing that roadmap.
Interesting stuff.
My prayer is the roadmap I will be sharing on Friday will help in pulling a coalition together for a discussion that will drive other roadmaps so that we all have one roadmap, not different roadmaps. That we all collectively work together to build our country. We have such a wonderful country that sometimes you just step back and you just wish that we knew the strength that we had.
Indeed.
Because we are letting this whole thing go. So my prayer is that we listen, we come to the event, we take this as input, and we also, beyond Friday, influence our leaders to come together across political parties. And let's have one movement that we all believe in, that we all execute together. Thank you.
It's really a good way to live it. I must thank you so much there, Dr. Ifueko Omoigui Okauru. She's the former chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FRS, and also National Chairperson of SWIT, Dr. Ruth Abiola Adimula. Thank you so much. Do enjoy the rest of your day. For the 4th week running, Nigerians have been returned to the order of groaning and gnashing of their teeth, no thanks to the lingering fuel scarcity. Well, I don't want to stay too long on all of this because I know you're all facing it across your area. I don't know how much you buy, but in some places we buy as much as 250 naira. Mr. Joseph Nwakwe is a partner at Zara Advisory and Consulting. He's also the former chairman of Society of Petroleum Engineers. Thank you so much. It's good to have you on the program this afternoon.
Thank you, Tolu. Good afternoon. Pleased to be here.
Yes, I know we've gone this route before, and it's really funny that we are here again. What is happening at this time? Depot owners are saying that they cannot continue to sell, maybe at the ex-depot price. Some are saying NNPC is supply has dropped. Some are saying there are issues with vessels. We can go on and on, Mr. Nwakwe. What is your understanding of the crisis that we face with regards to scarcity of PMS?
So, you know, you and I, we've discussed this extensively in the past, and I think the last time we met, I did highlight the fact that the system we are currently running is not robust enough. And what that means is that it cannot withstand pressure of whatever kind. It's rather fragile. And once it breaks, it takes a lot of time and effort to restore it to normalcy. So I think that's what we're seeing. And I've had all sorts of opinions. Some think it's a supply problem. Some say, oh, it's not supply, it's distribution. But my reading of the situation is that this is pretty much a supply problem. It started as a supply problem, of course, but the distribution system itself is challenged. So that's why it's taking so long to restore to normalcy.
So let's start that way. But I had a discussion with some depot owners, of course, with the media, and they're talking about some particular payments being made in dollars. I'm going to throw this to you. We are not a dollarized country. I spend naira. So why do we have to pay some of these charges in dollars? And we know what's happening to our FX or around our FX space.
Well, I think it's, I wouldn't like to be making excuses. I don't know the basis for regulatory agencies, government-owned entities to be charging for their services in dollars in Nigeria. I think that's something that needs to be looked at. It's part of the problem, but it's not the whole problem, right? The issues around cost. Yes, these payments are made in dollars. They increase the cost to the service provider, whether it's a depot owner or somebody who rents the ship that does lighterage. But I think that is not the problem. That's not at the heart of the current problem that we are facing.
So as it is, there's also an instance. Let me cite this to you now. If you go to a major marketer, talking about the known names here now, you get the product at about 170 naira per liter. But if you go to all of the other filling stations, you get this product for as high as 250 naira. And the regulators have looked the other way. I don't know. Subsidy still subsists.
Okay, I think you're right. That observation is very correct. And the reason is simple. NNPC does have some capacity to deliver products to the depots. And what I understand is going on is that the major marketers essentially queue up and wait for NNPC to supply them ex-depot. That way they can sell at the regulated prices. Now, the independents probably don't have that much patience and capacity as well. So they will need to get out there, go to depots that have assessed product ex-ship. Now, if a depot goes out to assess product ex-ship, the cost of ship, getting that product into their tanks and all of that, I understand they are selling a little lower than 200 right now, ex-depot. So if the independence goes to assess this product at, say, 200 Naira ex-depot, they cannot sell it at the regulated prices. So that's really what is going on. If NNPC has sufficient enough capacity to deliver products to every player in the market ex-depot at 148 or whatever that number is, then of course we will not have this problem. But the truth is that they have limited capacity to do that. And a significant portion of the market needs to be served by these independents who have limited capacity, who will now have to go to the depots that are selling at much higher prices. So they cannot buy at those, say, 200 Naira and come and sell at 180 or 185, no.
So clearly this might continue. Like I'm also being factual here. We see inflation on the high side. We see the price of diesel staying at about 800 Naira. And those trucks, some have to move as far as from Lagos to Maiduguri, to Abuja, to all of these areas. That would also affect their costs. So I'm worried. What is the way out? If we say deregulation, we've deregulated, and I have analysts that have told me that Tolu, diesel is selling for as much as 800 Naira to, in some cases at the moment, as of today. So what really will be the benefits of deregulating PMS?
I'll say in one word, investments will be the benefit. But let me backtrack a little bit. Let's look at the history. Initially, the infrastructure was developed, right? And it was designed to move products from the depots, marine depots, up to the inland depots by pipeline, right? That's why you have Atlas Cove, and then you have a pipeline system connecting Ibadan and all the other areas, and then you have, of course, going all the way through Enugu, Makodi, and others. So the network was built originally. It wasn't built with import dependence in mind. It was tying the refining locations, and it varies. So, for instance, Port Harcourt Refinery is a refinery located at the source of product, the crude, the feedstock, right? So you refine in situ, if you will, and then you pipe to the depot, and then from the depots, the tankers will pick them up to the retail stations. That was the original plan. Now, over the years, two things had happened. The refineries quit working, that's one. And the pipeline network to the depots essentially need to be revamped. So right now, nobody is using those systems to transfer products. What that means that everybody has to get on the road. And then, of course, we've seen a proliferation of shore depots, both private and, so every investor is building depots, and they're all concentrated around Lagos, Apapa, Ibafor, and all that. So that's a problem. And they've had challenges even, moving out of those locations because they are crowded in. The road infrastructure in and out of Apapa Port is a major bottleneck, distribution bottleneck. So I'm not saying that distribution is not a problem, but what I'm saying is that that's not what triggered this originally. I think the problem had to do with vessels, modern vessels coming in, and then there was story of a lien. NNPC either couldn't pay or they've had some challenges with with their partners who brought in the product. So they couldn't discharge into the lightweight vessels. And if it takes 3 days for that to happen, then that's how long it just spills all the way down the chain. So I understand that has been resolved. So they will now need to supply the market at much higher levels to get everywhere wet again. It takes time. If you look at the trend over this year alone, between January and I think January, February, you average about 60, 65 million liters a day truck out. This is published truck out numbers. And then, of course, sometime in March, in February, you had about the truck out dropped, right, to about 55 million liters a day. It took another 2 months. So April, May, you were doing 70, 75 to be able to close that gap. And that's what we've seen in October. In October, truck out went down to about 55 again. And so October, you have to have November, December. So they need to pump at 70 to 75 liters a day to be able to recover. I think that's the phase here in now. It is not helped. The ease with this is not helped by the state of our roads. It's not helped by the fact that we are solely dependent on trucking to move products around. So there are a lot of challenges in this. And that's why I keep saying that the bottom line is that we need to revamp the entire system. This current model will not work in the long run. We will continue to have these challenges until we rethink it.
We'll continue to have these challenges until we rethink it. So finally, smuggling is something that also worries me, because many would say even if we deregulate, or before we deregulate, we are serving other nations or neighboring countries around us, and that's also hitting us so badly. What do you think can be done around that angle?
The honest answer is we need to just stop price fixing, right? The reason there is smuggling is that there is an arbitrage opportunity between here and our neighboring countries, right? It's almost like what's happening with the filling stations. If you drive through the filling station, you see a lot of people with jerry cans, right? The reason that is that there's an arbitrage opportunity. So rather than go and queue and spend 3 hours in the queue, somebody says, oh, I can give you this at a premium. So there's an incentive for that fellow to go and buy fuel, queue up, take the pain, and then wait for you to come and pay him some money and take it. And it's the same thing. So I think that for as long as there's a differential in price between locally consumed fuel and what is selling across the border, I do not see that we can police the border that way, no. We do not have the capacity to do that. So the only solution would be to kind of allow prices to equilibrate, which is what you call deregulation. So however we look at it, that we kept saying that was the long-term solution to the challenges in the sector. You can't stem smuggling if we continue to have a huge price differential. I mean, we are talking of something in the neighborhood of 300-400 naira on a liter. It's so tempting. I can't imagine that that will not continue to happen. Even if we triple the size of the border patrols, it's not going to stop that. So I think we need to be clear on what we are, find permanent solutions to these challenges. We need to liberalize the entire market, allow prices to equilibrate, and then invest or create an enabling environment for domestic refining. So these are all critical elements to solving this problem.
Amos, thank you so much. Interesting conversation as usual with you, Mr. Joseph Nwakwe, partner at Zara Advisory and Consulting. Thank you so much. I do enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you very much, Tolu. Have a beautiful day.
All right, then. I hope next we are talking, it will be around fuel scarcity. Well, let's look at the figures from the exchange. The exchange still remains positive. We see 0.09% positive here. Gainers, Japan Gold, Honeywell Flour, Mayan Baker, and Nigerian Berries, FTN Cocos. For losers, we have Square Motors, Cornerstone, Cordvile, Chains, Transcorp. Effiong, get copies here. Effiong, what do you make of this sustained positive development we are seeing at the exchange.
To
at
lose
this time.
trades for 3 days
Yes,
this
yes,
week.
yes,
We have
yes.
traded in
Yes.
green all through. And that's to tell about the renewed interest in equities by fund managers and general investors. The reason is the incentive that the price levels that we see. You know, the market had been down for some time, and now as it begins to pick up, the stocks really remains very cheap. And so those with money moving, you know, to buy into those big companies that they had always wished they could, you know, get their stocks. And that's what we see. Again, if you look at the activity charts, many of the banks are coming to the market. They have very huge volume, you know, to exchange. And as we are approaching the year end for the banking industry set by the CBN, activities, you know, continue to get hot within that sector. If not the troubles that we have in the larger economy, this particular time used to be a beehive of activity at the stock market, where you see people exchanging things and then they want to, you know, offload, sell off so that they get money to spend during Christmas. But all of those things, you know, are being, you know, pushed and pledged downward because of the harsh economic situation, especially inflation that has hitten deep into our savings and salaries and even investments with dividend. So it makes people, you know, to just think too much before they do anything in the market. And as we are seeing political activities getting very hot, we just have to be able to pay attention to what the political parties are doing and the politicians. And so these are the things that are shaping the market. But whatever the market is able to do, it will mark time. As soon as we do election, if we have credible election and it's violence-free, and then whoever emerges, you will see the markets, you know, coming up straight away to take a particular direction. And I think that with this situation, when we do election and finish, the market will stay in a long period of boom. That's what I think.
I must thank you so much, Ifueko, for your analysis on the market.
It's a pleasure.
Today.
Thank you.
All right. Tell you that Hungary has scrapped off price caps on fuels. That's according to Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Mr. Gregory Gulais. The price cap, which was introduced a year ago, was set to expire at the end of December and has caused shortage of fuel supply, which led to fuel shortages across the country. Foreign players have cut fuel shipments to Hungary since government capped the price of petrol and diesel at 480 forints, that's $1.22 per liter. As part of Prime Minister's measure to shield households, removal of price cap will increase the price of petrol about 640 forints per liter, while the price of diesel will be 699 forints and will boost inflation that is already running above 21%. China's export and import shrank at reducing pace in the last 2.5 years in November. According to data obtained, export contracted 8.7% in November, a sharper fall from 0.3% loss in October, which marked the worst performance since February 2020. This was below analyst expectations of 3.5% decline. The world's second biggest economy was affected by the coronavirus pandemic, which was worse than markets had forecast. Economists predicted that exports are likely to shrink further over coming quarters, while outbound shipments will receive a limited boost for the easing of China's virus restrictions, while government focus 2023 will be on stabilizing growth, promoting domestic demand and opening up to the outside world. Crude oil prices declined today, with Brent crude falling close to its lowest this year, pressured by concerns about recession and easing fears that a Western cap on Russian oil prices will significantly curb supply. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude fell today, selling at $72.95, with a decline of 1.75%. Brent also experienced a downward price margin of 1.76% to sell at $77.95 per barrel. Bonny Light sells at $79.15 with a decline of 5.76%. And for the OPEC basket, crude oil dealers are offering $83.16 with a downward price review of 0.96%.